I felt a sigh of relief since I thought he was backing away. As he left the room, I drew back the drapes and stared out the window, taken aback by the total lack of visibility. The snow was falling heavily, and the wind was whipping into a whiteout. I knew I was in trouble the second I heard the water come on in the shower, and I knew it for sure when my partner came back and forcefully dragged me out of my warm bed. I attempted to swallow his assurances while I struggled to rise up, my last meal refusing to stay down. The meteorologist allegedly indicated we could take off because the storm stopped at 5,000 feet, even though he acknowledged that there was a blizzard on the ground. I had a sudden, overwhelming sense of clarity wash over me, and my entire being rebelled against the idea that someone could muster the mental fortitude to fly more than a mile above the clouds under the current conditions. I had no intention of doing that at all. Cramming everything into what was basically a giant, noisy wicker picnic basket, one without a cover, became more ridiculous the more I considered it. He was informed that he and anyone else flying had to be certified when he returned to the room. I stayed put on solid ground. Despite my protests, he forcefully threw me into the shower and instructed me to stop because we were in the air, and by we he meant me as well. Fighting back was pointless. Without a shadow of a doubt, my parting remarks will remain etched in our minds forever. I felt a shiver run down my spine as they let go of our lines, and we started to float upwards. My entire body tingled with anticipation, and uncontrolled fear nibbled at my mind. In the face of overwhelming amazement and billowing clouds enveloping us in a haze of opaque chalky whiteness, all qualms about feeling queasy were swiftly dispelled. We were encircled by an unsettling quiet. The hiss of a fantastic dragon-like propane fire was the only sound breaking the stillness. Suddenly, we pierced through the clouds, revealing the vapors for what they truly were: gossamer that tasted like cotton candy, after having seemed solid stone only moments before. As the sun rose, a kaleidoscope of blues painted by a goddess emerged in the sky, and towering mountains, each more majestic than the last, arose to greet us. As we saw dozens of hot air balloons, each with its own vibrant color scheme, burst through the skies, I couldn't help but giggle at a ridiculous idea that had just occurred to me. We seemed to be trapped inside a gumball machine that had gone wild. Without the stress of competition, we were free to play with the wind, and she with us as we descended to skate across a frozen alpine lake, competing in races with multiple deer. No amount of winter chill could quench my growing sense of awe, and I often found myself all by myself in my contemplative mood. All of a sudden, the world shifted. I was able to get some rest until I vaguely heard the pilot mention something about 12,000 feet. From my vantage point in the balloon, I was unable to hear him. From outside the balloon, a few meters away, I was listening in and taking notes. Disoriented by the idea of being outside of my physical form, I remained unusually composed as the realization dawned on me. Oh, I am not my body. Understanding that our physical selves are but a facade, I made the decision to leave my familiar reality behind with a single twist. The entanglement with this world was severed in that spiral, and I was led into a hallowed place, the base of the mountain, where I would soon dance with the music as we ascended to a central light. The tunes were fantastic. Standing in the bright sunlight high in the alpine meadows of Mount Rainier, the gorgeous peak in Washington state where I grew up, made me feel protected even though I knew I was dead. There are no words to describe the feelings that washed over me when my paternal grandma leaned in for a hug, her love enveloping me like a wave of electricity. When I was fighting for my life in the summer of 1963, she held me as my parents hurried to the hospital, and I was bathed with cold cloths as I battled spinal meningitis. That was our last encounter. I will never forget how she would assure me that everything would be well, and then ask me to stay. Because I was asleep, my parents and physicians all disregarded these strong recollections. She passed away soon after, so these were my final recollections of her. Surprisingly, I felt responsible for her death for a long time. My naivete led me to believe that my condition was somehow responsible for her passing. This idea spread quickly since my family had a strict no-talk policy on death and dying. As a result, my children had no idea that their mother had been battling a hopeless battle with diabetes and cancer for years. Walking hand in hand in this enchanted area, we were able to communicate beyond the artificial limitations of time and speech after more than 20 years of mute, inconsolable anguish. I discovered that my watch's hands did not serve as the ultimate arbiters of time. As our love was saved from the mirage of forgetfulness, sorrow faded away. As we ascended farther into the valley, closer to the shimmering light that seemed to illuminate the entire area, the word majesty took on a whole new connotation. Recalling the unease I'd had at the sound of what sounded like a fragile basket dangling under the balloon, I took solace in the solid ground under our feet. As we confidently crossed the valley, we were well aware that we were on an unnamed boundary. Nevertheless, it was remarkably similar to the real region I was familiar with. Having been trained to believe in this place for so long, I must say that it did not match the description of heaven in the least. Were we just passing through on our way to the other world I'd always dreamed of being a part of? As we stood here, we saw the days, months, and years intertwine, creating a bridge between seemingly unrelated worlds. We sensed the passage of time and witnessed occurrences from different eras, and suddenly, ideas of dimensions started racing through my head. Every single one of them was taking place at this same moment. On top of my childhood mountain, something was fundamentally different. It was real, but it didn't fit with anything I had ever known, especially my sense of time. The heretical ideas that I had long since internalized on my adventures with Sherman and Peabody were now recognized as being neither quirky nor juvenile. As I walked through a world that mimicked the one I had lived in for the past 35 years, I became acutely aware of the fact that Earth was impacted by more than one reality. As I came to the realization that nothing, not even things on Earth, could be described as good or bad, hot or cold, black or white, or up or down, a bell rang out. I knew for a long time that nothing was what I had imagined it to be. Realizing that we are more than our physical selves turned my world upside down, but the thought that I will eventually lose the bulk of my winter coat and fur further shattered my illusions. My magnificent black silk ball gown from the Kaiser Ball was back on my body. I could tell we were leaving the alpine meadows behind long before we got there. Suddenly, a structure that looked like an amphitheater materialized before our eyes. An enduring encore act of my life was on display here. Every single individual who had ever mattered to me appeared to emerge from what appeared to be a doorway situated at a right angle to us, just inside my field of vision. Many others have passed through this unseen gate, including my grandparents, my father's best friend, a 7th grade classmate, and countless others. Regardless of how one characterized them based on appearance or personality quirks, I could tell that their soul was unique. Step by step, they stepped into the spotlight, each one welcoming me with the same inaudible language my grandma and I shared, a connection that went beyond words. Writing about a communication that is brimming with positive energy is always a challenge for me, but this memory always makes me very frustrated. Following their brief exchange of what seemed like love sentiments, they turned to go through a door on my left. I had an unshakable certainty that I would shortly cross over to join them. A stranger, a man I didn't know, was the last act in my life. At the very heart of this karmic stage, he pivoted to meet my gaze. Suddenly, it seemed as if someone had draped a thin veil across my field of vision, making it seem hazy and distorted. Even though I couldn't make out his features, I felt his presence and could feel his voice speaking to my soul from a distance. His words stayed with me. "Lenclaire, you will be a catalyst for change, for love. You will bring forth, hold, and honor remembrance." They left an indelible mark on my soul and spirit. In 27+1, we will meet and you will awaken the realms, realities, and vestiges so that the spirit can recall the dance and restore the holy feminine back to sign. I understood that what he said was truer than anything I had ever accepted at face value, but I didn't know what 27+1 meant. The emotions that flooded my soul left me with a knowledge that has stayed with me and is more distinct than any other memory. Regrettably, he didn't tell me that it would be years before any understanding of this task would emerge, nor did he tell me what was necessary to make its real meaning realize. He turned and retreated back over the same threshold through which he had come, leaving me with a sense of being remembered, recognized, understood, and loved. This made me realize that there are unlocked doors leading to other realms of time, and that those who know how to find them can enter them. Going forward, I vowed to myself that I would remember and find them on the edge of eternity. Just as suddenly as this experience started, it ended. I was alone again, but I knew I would never be alone for long. My dad and grandma came back to join me, and we joyfully started to communicate through vibrations, taking part in a sacred communion. We felt the earth beneath our feet, the mountain above us, and the shimmering blue sea that lay just beyond our horizon. My dad shocked me by saying, "You can see me today." In a flashback to a bygone era, I recalled how this very spot on June 25, 1977 played host to one of the most formative experiences of my life. My family and I had been driving down this mountain after spending the night at Sunrise Lodge, when I suddenly became unable to breathe, causing my husband to brake on a perilous curve. Out of the car, I slid down a gravelly slope, my body and mind in excruciating pain. Once stopped, I sat on a protrusion of rocks and waited what felt like an eternity for the physical pain to ease, until I mustered the strength to make my way back up to the car. We continued our journey, but my husband, terrified and perplexed, disregarded my pleas that we pull over and go home. After 5 hours of traveling, we finally reached our destination. Our friends were there to break the sad news. My dad had died of a heart attack while scuba diving near our home on Maui early that morning. We were all shocked to hear that he passed away at the same moment I was having my crisis on the mountain. Despite the distance of more than 2,500 miles, I felt his dying process physically and psychically, even though I didn't know what was happening to him. I wondered for a long time if he was thinking of me. The terrible grief I felt that day made me resolve to never again endure such emotional torment. I resolved to finish the job my dad started when I was 5 years old, disconnecting my psychic abilities. His goal was never accomplished because the sight and hearing remained with me throughout my life. However, I learned to keep my mouth shut after he summoned other priests to pray for me, pour oil on my head, and beg their God to remove the call. It was several years after the accident that I started to comprehend. In this reunion, he taught me that love and pain are not identical twins, that sorrow is not inseparably bound up with physical death. Even though we may feel in our emotional bodies that love has been forever stifled, the drama of emotion can blind us to the reality that love is constantly flowing, like a fluid bond that travels from the soul through the body and spirit eternally. My connection with my dad and others goes beyond genetics. It's an energetic intention that binds us. This bond is infinitely greater than my need for his or anyone else's approval. Once again, the unseen guide of this adventure requested a new outfit, another one I couldn't see or feel. Now I was dressed in the most breathtaking gown imaginable, a shimmering sea of mother of pearl and ivory that seemed to breathe. The fabric, which was so delicate it looked like spider webs, was flecked with stardust. As the gown drew near, I felt a weightlessness that seemed to emanate from every cell in my body. But then the light bulb went out, and it hit me. This shimmering fabric was actually my energetic vibration, the divine signature, the very essence of my being. A being made of beautiful, pure, and translucent light. As I ascended to the peak, I felt like a bride on her way to her husband's arms. Just one step brought me to the point where my right footprint became entwined with eternity. In that moment, my life was transformed. Observing a cosmic loom spin this strand into a beautiful tapestry, I saw light shuttle weft and warp creating a pattern. The pattern was so intricately simple that I knew it had to be intentional, as it moved with compassion and absolute purpose. Time itself was a divine spinning wheel, with music braiding a song of arcing angles. I knew this music stirred the ethers, its rainbow of light defining and filling space, its weaving of light spinning matter and connecting it into eternity. With just one step into the cosmic dance, I felt at home. As I reconnected with the boundless wellspring of love, I came to understand that my existence was just a speck, a holographic fragment of the entire in this light. It was the first time I had ever experienced such pure joy. Then out of nowhere, chaos slammed into me like a needle being purposefully pushed down and pulled across an old LP screeched. A violent noise engulfed my thoughts, emotions, and the room as I started a battle, a life or death struggle with this enigmatic foe. I was losing the battle. Whatever had seized my left ankle was stronger than me, and I couldn't free myself. Nonetheless, I was resolute in my determination to commit the music and the pattern the loom's weaving of light